Cayman, audience at large, we've finally done it. I've put in about 4.5 hours. How many of you played, Cayman?
I'm probably at about the 15 mark.
Okay.
At this point.
So between us, just south of 20 hours roughly of Baldur's Gate 3, we're just dipping our toes in, folks. Our toesies are just being dipped in this water of this fucking ocean of a video game. But we have impressions. We've been playing. We have our thoughts. Cayman, you have played a lot more than me. So I'd like to start with you. You started a few days before I did because I was doing Resident Evil separate ways and finishing up The Expanse. And I finished Starfield, by the way, which I didn't mention. And I started doing New Game Plus. But if me and our boy Mondo do a little spoiler cast, I'll save all those thoughts for that. But talk me through what you're feeling, what you're thinking about Baldur's Gate 3. And Nick in the chat, are we playing on PC or PS5? We are playing on PS5. Good sir.
Yes. Yeah. So let me just go ahead and answer the question I think everyone has. Does the port work? Because a lot of PC ports don't really translate well to console. I can definitively say yes. I feel like this is a really solid port, and I feel like the controls with the controller, whatever they did, it feels great. It feels awesome. The DualSense feels great with this game. And so, yes, I think that this is a solid port from PC to PlayStation. I think they did a great job. With that being said, overall, just 15 hours in thoughts. And this is funny that I say this because I actually looked this up and I'm not the only one. I'm like, is this game either one, really fucking hard, or am I just a goddamn idiot? And you know what the answer is? I'm just a goddamn idiot. I literally read an article that said, is this game hard or are you stupid? And I want to say it was from maybe Game Rant. And it basically addressed my exact same thought process. Was like, this game is so cool. And they do things in this game I've never seen done before. And it genuinely feels like I'm playing a dungeon. I'm playing fucking D&D on my PlayStation.
For sure.
It gives you that level of freedom and that the ability to make changes and do things that are cool. Getting items, like magically infused items that specifically work, and you have to be very strategic about who's going to get these items, because certain items will work better for others, and you can kind of build your companions around that. My problem is I'm really dumb. And I think on one hand, yes, I will take full responsibility for being stupid. But at the same time, it's like, it kind of hurting a little bit of my enjoyment, mainly just because there's a lot of times where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
Sure.
Because the game gives you so much freedom. And it's
pump the brakes for just a second. Let's talk through what character did you roll? Sure. Who are you?
Sure.
Give us a background on the Dumpster Boys Baldur's Gate 3 character.
Yeah, so I decided to try to go as neutral as possible.
Okay.
I was like, look, I'm going to go very neutral on this run. And I went with a human fighter. And I have gotten to a point where I've unlocked like my specialty class, and you are given a list of things you can choose from to like customize your character even more. And so my customization was to go, I think it's called Battle Master.
Yep, Battle Master.
So my character is basically a jack of all trades when it comes specifically to being able to use weapons.
Okay.
And so I've kind of built myself into this trying to be very tanky and trying to be like high damage tanky, but I can't really do much in terms of elemental, which is fine because you can customize your party to fill those gaps. Right. And that's, I think what I like about this game is you can do that.
What's your name?
My name is, I don't know. I use Chat GPT to give me a really cool fantasy name. And I think it's something like, it's just like Vlarg.
Get good.
Or something like that. Yeah. It's dope. Right. So it's cool. And so my character is, he does everything I need him to do.
Yeah.
And I like the way that works, and I like the way it functions. And early on, obviously, when you do skill checks, because 90% of this game is skill checks.
Right.
The one downside is, like, I haven't got to a point where like my luck has increased enough for me to be able to like roll higher. But through the use of magical items and stuff like that, I'm able to have other characters have better success in different fields. So the game kind of makes the game is like there's a ton of freedom here for you and how you want to play this game and how you want to do this and choices and all this. And everything matters and nothing matters. And I love that about it because
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm going to cause some cataclysmic event in this game. I'm just figuring shit out as I
for
go.
sure. Can I ask you a question based on a comment
Yeah,
in the chat?
sure.
Terry says, I feel like I'm a dummy as I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3. I honestly don't know a ton about D&D, so I'm having a hard time with learning the basics. How familiar are you with, I know you've talked about playing some D&D
Yeah.
in your past, but like, do you feel like you're coming in here with just like the most basic of knowledge about D&D, or do you know a little more than that and you feel like that's helping you in your journey with this game?
Yeah, so I think on two hands, one, I'm coming into it with more knowledge. I haven't played D&D in probably a couple of years, but used to play it a bunch.
Okay,
So I
you used to
know
play a
about
bunch. Okay.
you know about character sheets and all of these different aspects that really play into your characters and the story and things like that. But what I will say is by the 15-hour mark, I don't think you need to know what I knew going in because by that point, you've kind of gotten used to what the mechanics are.
Okay.
The issue is the game is not easy, and I'm playing on easy mode, and even
Yeah.
that's not easy. And it's like what it's kind of like that Elden Ring kind of thing where it's like, should I be here or should I not be here? And with
Which brings in Liz in the chat. She says her favorite thing is that there isn't a right or wrong way to play, which
yeah,
kind of feels like your experience so far,
yeah,
like of should I be here or should I not?
yeah, but I think that's the big thing for me is like in Elden Ring, you kind of know if you belong in an area. And I feel like Baldur's Gate does a good job of never making you feel like you don't belong, but they nudge you in a direction of being like, hey, you might want to get some better equipment,
Sure.
or you might want to go do something else for a minute before you come back here. But if you want to give it a go, because a lot of this is luck based, and if you have the right builds and party members set up, like you can probably just power through some of this shit.
Yeah.
And I like that. I think that's a really cool mechanic. And I think the story so far has, I think, been the biggest surprise for me.
Yeah.
Is like I don't know what it is about the story, but I'm like, I'm actually interested in seeing where this goes. And with that being said, I'm torn. I think I see this is like Elden Ring for me, where I see this as it is, as like this could be a masterpiece. This
Sure.
could be one of the greatest RPGs ever made. But then the question is like, but is it the best RPG for me? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where I'm coming in being like, the difficulty curve early on is really tough. And I don't think I think a lot of people who play this game might be turned off really early on by the difficulty curve, both with just learning what this game is and how it functions. The actual gameplay can be a bit tricky at times, trying to figure out what is the right move. And there's times where like you're gonna go up against what feels like a boss encounter and you just walk right through, but then you just run into a handful of goblins that throw grease on the ground. And it's like, how the fuck do I get through this now? Just one jar of grease and my whole run's
Yeah.
over now. So I think it's tough. I'm excited to see where this ends up on my end of year list.
Sure.
Because right now, I mean, like I think we've covered, been a shit ton of really good games.
Yeah, for
And a
sure.
lot of really good games to come. And so I think this is really going to come down to is like, is this game going to click with me by hour 20? And
Yeah.
that's probably going to be that moment. But I am curious. You're not in as far, but I know that you've had some pretty strong feelings on this. Though.
Yeah. So I am also pretty torn on this game, but in a different way. So to kind of give my own background coming into this, I have only dabbled in D&D, but I've played a lot of Monster of the Week, which if you don't know what Monster of the Week is, it's like a variation of D&D that's a lot more narrative driven instead of like role driven. Not to say that there isn't rolling in it, but you only use a D6. And it's kind of built off of that, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Smallville, Angel kind of episodic idea where every time you play, there's going to be a monster of the week. You have your party. You're kind of and so I've done a lot of that, especially in the last like 2 years.
Sure.
And so there are certain things that I was able to understand immediately in this game that was really helpful. You don't roll for initiative in Monster of the Week, but like I know that that's a thing.
Yeah.
But things like perception and like these things, having a base knowledge of that has been really helpful because my biggest issue with this game is it makes no fucking sense at first. And they
Yeah.
really don't they do not help you at all. There's
Mhm.
this option at the beginning that's like, do you want to toggle off tutorials? And I'm like, you know what? I've played so many video games in my life. Let's toggle them off. Let's see. And then 15 minutes in, I'm like, okay. Thankfully, the settings were like, do you want to reset tutorials? And it'll give you new tutorials for every new thing. I was like, yes, that please. So I did that, and I was starting to kind of show me the basics a little more. But it's just such a deep, deep, deep menus game
Mm.
that I am really struggling with at the moment to wrap my head around. But that being said, even though, 4.5 hours in, there's a lot that I feel like I'm fighting with the game on.
Mm.
I can't help but be incredibly impressed by what this game does.
Yes.
I am kind of in awe of this game and how Terry kind of responded to something that you said, and this is like one of like a big point that I have that I'm really impressed with this game on. You had talked about how like it doesn't really like tell you if you go into an area, this isn't for you. Like it just kind of, it might, naturally challenge you. Terry says he got to a section and the game literally gave him a pop-up that said, this section of the game will be abysmally hard for a party at your level. Do you want to continue? You had an experience of 15 hours in, it took you, I think you said 10 or 12 hours to like really start getting companions. Is that right?
So yeah, and funnily enough, you have a companion I don't even have in 4 hours in.
So
And
yeah, I'm 4
yeah.
hours in and I already have 5 companions.
Hmm.
One of them I just sent back to my or 2 of them I guess are at my camp, and it took you over 10 hours to get up to that point.
Yeah.
And so I'm so impressed by the fact that, like, to Liz's point, there isn't a wrong way or a right way to play this game. It's just like, go explore, and all of these characters are kind of dropped in certain areas. But what's even cooler about it, Cayman, is I got to this point. Lae'zel, I think is her name, the orc lady, orcish
Yeah,
looking lady.
she
She's not an
fucked me.
orc, but I forget what the
She fucked me, man.
yeah.
Yeah, she
I
did.
get to a point where she's like in a cage.
Yeah.
She's Gith. Thank you, Kreslin. I get to a point where she's in this cage, like hanging from a rock. And I convince these people because, I didn't mention, I'm a bard. I'm a half drow bard. So I'm very much going on I want to be able to talk my way out of situations. And, I'm paying for it in combat in some ways, but I've really liked to be able to talk my way out of shit. So I talk my way out of this little encounter. I convince them that more Githyanki are coming. So they leave. And I'm like, I don't know how to get her out of this cage. And I walk away and I walk back and the cage is gone. I'm like, shit. So I Google, I'm like, Lae'zel bug disappearing. And I go to Reddit and someone's like, hey, this happened for me. But if you don't have this encounter with her, she's going to show up in Act 2 again. And I'm like, that is so fucking cool that because of the way this world is built, it's so easy for me to have missed that.
Yeah.
And
I
so
wonder if
they thought of like,
why.
if you don't see this person, she's going to be in an encounter later in the game so that you're not gonna, because it's a very important character to the story. And yet Kreslin to 90 in the chat, the world keeps turning whether you're there or not. That is so cool, and I'm so impressed by that. But am I having fun? Only sometimes so far. But I think it's a me problem though. I don't think it's a game problem.
And I don't, and I feel that 100%. That's one of my things where there's been some frustration. And I don't know if it's necessarily bugs or what it is, but I've had a couple encounters where I'm like, my party will split up unprovoked.
Yeah.
My party will split up. So I'll go think and get into an encounter and be like, I gotta fight. Where the fuck is the rest of my people? And they're just like hanging out in a completely different area. And I'm like, oh God, oh God, oh God. So that can be a bit of an issue. There was one encounter I had where I thought I was going in the right direction and I was not. And then all of a sudden I got locked into a battle I couldn't escape, even though I couldn't get to the things that were locked on to me. And there's been some moments like that, which that's probably the biggest reason, like, that if I'm sitting here being like, I'm a bit torn on whether I'm having fun is because, and it's like the Starfield issue where
Sure.
I lost a lot of progress. And this is another one of those games where you have to auto save constantly, because if you die and it didn't auto save or you didn't manually save right before an encounter or something like that, like it can drastically impact your, like, how much progress you made during that time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
these are just little things that, like, it's a design choice, and I'm not sure if it's a design choice because they want it to be that way, or it just feels, I guess, maybe dated. Like Starfield had the same issue for me
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
like, it's 2023. We shouldn't have to auto save before every encounter, like, or we have to manually save this much. And so it can be a bit frustrating, but like, I think the biggest draw for me is like, I had this encounter where I just ran into two random dudes who were badgering an old lady, and it led to this like whole other quest line, and I just ended up having like this really fun moment of like trial and error figuring out how to get through this, only it to get to the end of it and then being like, hey, you can kill me if you want. No, I don't think you should. So if you don't kill me, though, I got a nice little treat for you. And I'm like, well, you are a terrible creature in the woods. I probably should kill you, but I want to know what happens if I don't. And I got a 1+ stat on everything. And I'm like,
Wow.
see, so I'm like, so it toys with you of like, and these kind of things I think are really cool. And this is where, like, I think Starfield comes in. And a lot of people got shitty about this, where they're like, we shouldn't be comparing Starfield to Baldur's Gate 3 because they're drastically different.
Sure.
And yes, they are drastically different. And both are going to have different levels of fun for different people.
Yeah.
But if we're looking at this through the lens of like RPG mechanics and what's revolutionary, Starfield isn't it. It's Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah.
Baldur's Gate 3 does things that I've never seen done in RPGs before. And it's really fucking cool. And
Yeah.
the fact that you can have sex with pretty much everything is
Sure.
not a bad trade-off. So
I really love how it feels, something that I've kind of felt about a lot of RPGs, and honestly, Starfield in a way is one
mm,
of them, where I feel like the skill tree only really matters to a certain extent.
mhm.
And like there are certain things that like maybe they're behind a wall with like lock picking or things like that, specifically speaking about Starfield. But it seems like for the most part, you can kind of get to that game and choose whatever skills you want. And it's not going to like super drastically change the way that you play. But I can already tell 4.5 hours into Baldur's Gate, when I'm choosing skills and spells, and like it really is already having a big impact because of the rolling system,
Mhm.
which I think is really cool. Like bringing that in from like the D&D side of it, and how much the rolling system really impacts basically every aspect of gameplay, whether it's conversations when you're just exploring around. If you have a higher perception, you'll notice more things in the environment, things you can pick up, things that you can interact with, secret doors like hidden in the forest, like that kind of shit. If you have a low perception, even if you walk up right to it, you're not going to see it. And so like
Yeah.
that kind of stuff is cool, where now all of a sudden I'm instantly gratified and I'm instantly rewarded by putting points into perception,
Mhm.
because it's going to immediately help me find things that could pose danger or could pose like reward. That's the word I'm
And
looking for.
I think it's really like a really cool mechanic that they do in this game is that you can switch to whatever party member you want at any given point and
Yeah.
have them be the leader of the party. And
You can
so
even play the whole game as them if you want, which I thought
yeah.
was cool.
And so one of the things I noticed was early on was like my character's charisma is dog shit. I got negative charisma rolls, bud. Okay.
Not
So
good. I have a +5 on charisma right
I
now.
have one of my companions is a rogue trickster and he has high lockpick and thief skills, and he's got high charisma. So if I go into an encounter with something, I will just switch over to him right before I go into the encounter and see if I
Cool.
can talk my way out. Or with one of my companions has high perception, so I will put them at front when I know I'm not going to get into a situation because they can see traps. And so it's like it makes you change the way that you play in a
Yeah.
way that like feels super organic.
Yeah.
And it
And it
doesn't.
really feels like the Lord of the Rings, I'm a part of a party and
Yeah.
I'm going through this adventure and they all have their own pros and cons and I have to think as kind of my own game master, what would be the beneficial choice here? Who should I go in with? Who should I leave at camp? Like I really love that you're always kind of having to think through that lens of what's going to set me up for success in this moment as opposed to I'm just going to barrel my way through and I'll figure it out.
Yeah. And I think that's soon. And also, I think it's really worth pointing out as well is this game is hysterical.
It's very
It
funny.
is so fucking funny. The writing is so clever. And I love the fact that there's like I had a moment where I tried to talk to a pig and I rolled and it was like your animal handling skill is too low and I like critical missed and the prompt it gave me because I critical missed and I looked this up and it's not forever. It does not, you have to critical miss for this. And the narrator comes on and goes, "You tried to talk to the pig, but it's a pig. Are you stupid?" I just was like laughing my ass off. I'm like, that's funny. Like,
Yeah.
there's some really, really, really funny moments in this game that I think it's just really smart. And so I definitely see like where I'm at right now, like what I see from what I've played is that this game is 100% a game of the year contender.
Oh, I already can tell 4.5 hours in. For
Yeah.
sure.
The question is it the game of the year for me?
Right.
And I think that's the thing, right? Like where there's probably a good chance that Spider-Man 2 is probably going to be my personal favorite game of the year. But like we did last year when we did our big awards, I was like, Elden Ring is game of the year. God of War Ragnarok is my game of the year.
Yeah.
And I think this could be one of those situations where I could say something like Tears of the Kingdom or Spider-Man or Final Fantasy 16 are my personal favorites this year. However, from what I've played, from what I've seen, like this very much is what I would consider to be game of the year. And so what I will say in final thoughts on this is that I feel like this game, there's a huge asterisk next to this game because I think there's going to be people out there who pick this up based on the hype and immediately are like, I wasted $70.
I agree.
And there's going to be people who pick this game up that's like, I'm going to play through this game 20 times because every playthrough is going to probably be different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's awesome. Well, it's awesome for them. It's sad. So like, I definitely think like, unlike something like Starfield or Spider-Man, I would say before you purchase, if you're on the fence, look up some videos, look up some like beginner stuff and just see like, hey, is this something that I think that I will get my value out of?
Right.
Because I do think that like it's going to give different levels to different folks.
I agree. Nick in the chat, people said the same for Elden Ring. LOL. You're right. And it's interesting because I think the reason that they said that about Elden Ring was its actual combat difficulty, where I think for this, it's just a really high barrier for entry because of how complicated it is.
Yes.
Which brings in my like two like gripes that I have. And then I also want to bring in one other thing from the chat. I also feel like the way that the mapping system works, again, this might change. I'm only 4.5 hours in, is really not fun for me because I have a really hard time understanding where I should be going for things. It's not as bad as Elden Ring where like it actually is giving me waypoints on the map. It's like, you know, in a spot of blackness on the map, this is where I need to go. I just have to figure out how to get there. But I feel like at this point, I have so many quests that I've picked up just from talking to people that it's really hard to digest the journal and the map combined in terms of like, what should I be going after? What should I be doing? And it's just not a fun experience when like I'm having this paralysis of like, there's so much that this game is showing me right now but I think once I kind of settle into it and kind of work through that, that won't be as big of a gripe. I think that's more of a kind of a growing pain of learning how to play this game.
Sure.
But I absolutely agree with you. Like this, it's going to be a huge turnoff for some people. Because the first time you really get into combat in this game, you have 3 entire wheels to choose from of like powers and options. And it's like, usually you start with like 1 or 2. You have 5.
I've got 5 wheels, baby.
But it's like usually in a game, you start with like just maybe even just one thing. And as by the end of it, you have 25 things, but you've learned about those as you've gotten them. This game is just like, here's a fuck ton of shit that you can do at first. And it was really overwhelming.
Yeah.
And then the second thing, this is something I've screamed about on this podcast before. Let me fucking pause my video games whenever I want to. It's not like other games where if I pause, like I can die, at least not in my experience yet, but like during a cinematic scene, Rose walks in and wants to talk to me about something. I want to be able to pause the game so that I can stop focusing on that and focus on Rose, but it won't let me. Just like the video keeps going or conversations will keep going. It just like won't let me stop. I don't know if it's a setting that I've put on, but like in the chat, like Liz, if you're still there, anyone else that's played it, Kreslin, like is this just the thing? Or is this something that I've done? Because I fucking hate when the games do that for me and don't let me just stop it.
I wonder, that is a good question. I don't think I've seen that on my side yet. Do you have it set
Terry and Liz saying that it's the same for them.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's that.
But maybe it's a setting that we all have, but like it's frustrating. It's like my biggest pet peeve with video games when I can't pause it. And like, even if sometimes a game will, like Elden Ring was like this, where if you go into like the accessibility section specifically, it lets you pause it. So like I would, when I was playing that game, remember like pause, up, square, whatever it was to actually pause the game. But I don't think that there is something like that. But Liz says if I save and go to the menu and log right, like I can go out and go in. My question though, what if it's in the middle of a cinematic? Will it pick up from the beginning of that cinematic? If you don't know, that's totally fine, but I'm just curious. So yeah, so those two things don't love, but like those are things that I can get over. Okay, she says it will, so that's good. So I'll start doing that. But it's like it's a frustrating experience. But to end it on a positive note, Cayman, Kreslin 1090 in the chat, and Kreslin, let me know if I'm saying that right or if it's like C Reslin. I don't want to be saying your name wrong. Another cool thing about Baldur's Gate 3 is that there are normally a few different ways to handle encounters. I've had an encounter where I was ambushed by some bad guys and I convinced them all to unalive myself. I love that, or unalive themselves. Like easily my favorite part of this game is that ability to completely change the way something's going based on your skills. Are you just going to kill these people, or are you going to like be able to talk them down, or like you said, convince them to unalive themselves? Like whatever that is, I love it. So we'll have more thoughts on this game, I'm sure, later. It kind of felt like this was a full review. It certainly wasn't, because we've only put in the time that we have. But really, really impressed with this game so far. Certainly, I think will be in my short list. But I am curious to see, like you said, how far it can make its way up there. Cayman, we've been running a bit long, but I do want to do a quick. Nick, who's in the chat right now, at least he was earlier, sent in an audience submission for a Sea of Stars review. He had talked about it in the chat a few weeks ago. You talked about it on the podcast a few weeks ago. So just wanted to pull some things from his review here, because as I've said before, I love when you guys do this. Feel free to send me extended thoughts or reviews on any game you're playing. Email, DM, voice memo, whatever you want to do. If it's a voice memo though, send it in a way that I can save it, because I love sharing your guys' thoughts on the podcast too. So Nick says, just finished the normal and the secret, which he says is the real ending. Graphics 10 out of 10, gorgeous game. Music
so beautiful.
10 out of 10 will definitely be a soundtrack that'll be remembered up there with the great JRPGs. Combat 9 out of 10. At first pretty easy, but as the game went on, combos became a game of chess. Ultimate moves are gorgeous. Great boss designs, and I'm glad we were given variety on enemies. Gameplay 10 out of 10. Didn't run into any bugs during my playthrough on the PS5. Story 9 out of 10. Love that one specifically. Really enjoyed it. Starts very simple. As it progresses, we're introduced to huge plot twists. 8.5 for the normal ending. 10 out of 10 for the secret ending. Love that. Conclusion, actually one of my favorite RPGs I've played in a long time. It was relaxing. Would love it on the Switch to play it in bed or when the PS5 allows it. Incredible soundtrack. Really cool character designs. You can tell this was made with love. His final grade is a 9.5 out of 10.
Hell yeah.
Essentially, it is a must-play game. Only took him about 20 to 35 hours. So certainly, I really hope to finish this one by the end of the year. But love that you loved that, Nick. And let me know, especially if you're still in the chat, do you think this is game of the year potential for you?